Hey everyone. So this is a companion video to a new RetroPie 8 GB base image that I'm releasing called Motion Blue. And the image, it does have a few differences versus every other image that you've probably ran across so far. So I wanted to go ahead and do a video about it and point out some of the design changes and differences that I've implemented in here. So as a high level, it is an 8 GB base RetroPie image, and so when you download it, you'll get in the 7-zip file, you'll get the image file, and you'll get two PDF files. One is a README file all about Motion Blue and the design changes and enhancements that I've done to it, and the other one is kind of more a design philosophy idea of why I made the changes that I did, and so give that a read as well. And you'll also get a Photoshop template for the system wheels down at the bottom. You'll get the template so you can make your own to match. But otherwise, it's fully updated, both RetroPie and Attract mode, and everything's fully configured and ready to go. When you first burn it over to an SD card, the first time you boot it up, it'll just be like normal. You'll have to configure your gamepad controllers, and then get your Raspberry Pi set up on the Wi-Fi network, and then go ahead and expand your file system so that way RetroPie can use the full breadth of whatever card that you end up putting this on. But as I mentioned, it is just an 8 GB image, so it doesn't come with any BIOS files, ROM files, or game media files, but it does include all of the system media files for the video previews that we're watching now, and the wheel art that you see down at the bottom for Attract mode. But otherwise, it is a normal RetroPie image in the regards of getting it configured initially, but that's where a lot of differences come into play. For Emulation Station, I've added a lot of different systems, a lot of new systems into the ES Systems config file, which means there's new folders over in the ROMs directory that you'll need to know about, as well as a few other changes and fixes and tweaks that I've did. And all of this is described in that PDF README file, so I do urge you guys to read that when you download this Motion Blue. When it comes to Attract mode, however, though, it's still set up as you would expect, but there's a big overlying difference between Motion Blue and every other image to date that I've seen. In the RetroPie gaming community, up until this point, it's kind of been standoffish, if you will, of the HyperSpin community. The HyperSpin community has been out there for a number of years. So Emu Movies, Launchbox, Retro FE, all of the other front ends, Maximus Arcade, they've all adopted, if you will, a retro gaming community naming standard as far as what to call an emulator, what to call a ROM file, so that way the matching media file can easily be obtained and it'll work and everything else. Up until Motion Blue, the RetroPie community has not really embraced that aspect of it. Starting with Motion Blue and going forward, I hope others adopt it as well, but starting with Motion Blue, everything in Attract mode is HyperSpin ready, which all of the emulator files are named just like their HyperSpin counterparts. The ROM list files, the display names, the ROM files, so that way anything you obtain from, say, Emu Movies, media-wise, it'll match whatever system that you've downloaded it for. So it's that design philosophy that's kind of powered Motion Blue. And so let's jump into it and let's look at a few differences that I've implemented here in Motion Blue. So as I mentioned, when you first boot it up, you're going to get into Emulation Station, just like you normally do. Go through the normal steps to configure your gamepad and such. But then when you switch over to Attract mode, this is what you're going to be greeted with when you first boot into Attract mode. So here we are at the Attract mode options wheel. The theme that you see here is called Motion Blue. This is a 16:9 version, since all of the system media I've included, all of the system previews are 16:9s. But there is a Motion Blue 4:3 video preview version that all of the other individual systems use, and we'll see it here in a minute. But with Motion Blue, with the base image, what I've done to get it HyperSpin ready is I've taken the HyperSpin XML files, their HyperSpin database files that contain every game for a particular system. I've converted them to attract mode ROM list files. So in Motion Blue, all of the emulators are already pre-configured and ready to go. I've pre-built every display for those same emulators. They're already there and visible on the menu. And I've pre-made every ROM list as well. So in Motion Blue, you'll never have to generate a ROM list. They're already there, already fully fleshed out, and all of the metadata for every game is already there. So let's step through a couple of them here. So very similar to RetroPie in Emulation Station, say Atari 2600. The emulator is installed, but you don't see Atari 2600 in the menu until you actually add a game ROM, and then it shows up. Motion Blue kind of uses that same similar philosophy. So I'm just going to scroll over here, and I'll explain why there's three names in a minute. But I'm going to scroll over to Atari 2600. So here's the system selection wheel. So if I go into the Atari 2600, you'll notice there's no game wheels or video previews. That's because there's no ROMs on this image. But the display is pre-made for every system that's on here. If we hit tab and come up to display, you can see all the different displays are made. So let's go to the Atari 2600. Oops, sorry. So as I mentioned, the display name is Atari 2600, and everything is named, like I said, just like the HyperSpin counterparts. It uses the Motion Blue 4x3 layout. It uses a ROM list that's already ready and for us for Atari 2600. Show and cycle is set to yes, and show and menu, they're both set to yes. So as you look at the system selection menu, or you scroll through the cycle of all your different displays one at a time, Atari 2600 will show up. But every display that's pre-made, there is a global filter that's been applied. So if we go in here, it basically says file is available equals 1. So what that means is the Atari 2600 display will show up as we see it today, but as you add ROMs and their matching media for wheels and video previews, they will automatically show up in the Atari 2600 display. You don't have to regenerate the ROM list or anything else. As long as your ROM files and media are HyperSpin ready, meaning they're named appropriately, they'll automatically start showing up as you copy those files over into the ROMs directory. So as I mentioned, there's new directories for ROM files for certain systems. So within that PDF file, when you download this 7-zip package, in there is all the detailed information you'll need about where to copy the media into, and those few systems that have new directories made in the ROMs folder. All of the media for attract mode, those folders are already pre-made as well over in the ROMs directory system folders. So with Motion Blue, the way it's set up and the way it's laid out, once you write it to an image and go through the basic Emulation Station setup, what's left is just copy over your BIOS files into the BIOS directory, copy over your ROMs and their matching media, and that's it. You don't have to generate ROM lists or do any other configuration. Everything's already done for you and just waiting for you. So as I mentioned, there's 2 default themes that are set up, and you can easily copy more over. But for instance, we're in the Atari 2600 Motion Blue 4x3. If you go into Layout Options, and this is the same for the 4x3 or the 16:9 version, you can change the motion background color. There's 5 different colors to choose from. There's blue, gray, green, orange, and red. We'll leave it as red. And you can change the cabinet color, same 5 colors, and we'll just change this to red as well. you can show or hide the game information text box, which is what you see at the bottom of the screen where it says the year the game was made, the game's name, the manufacturer, that types of information. And then the Enable System logo, and I'll show you here in a second once we get back to the Atari 2600. But what that option does is it shows the wheel for that system at the top of the screen. So as you can kind of see, Atari 2600 wheel behind at the top of the screen. That option right there is the Enable System logo. And we'll go ahead and leave it there. So we've changed our colors to red. So let's back out. And so as you can see, we now have red as our motion background and our cabinet color. But again, we don't have any ROMs, so there's no preview screens or game wheels. But if we did, they would automatically show up. And so quickly, we'll go over emulators. So as I mentioned, all of these emulators are already here, pre-configured, and pre-set up. So there are three. Let me talk about the MAME ones real quick. Within RetroPie, there's three, let's call them classifications, if you will, of MAME emulators. There's MAME Advance, there's MAME LibRetro, so that's any of the MAME 2003, 2010, 2014 emulators. They're all LibRetro based. And MAME for All. Those are the only three categories of MAME emulators that RetroPie supports. So the way I've did the emulators, I've only created emulator files for true emulators just as they appear in the ES Systems config file as well. So there's no false emulators in here. So it's strictly emulators. But I did build one for each of the MAME. And there are displays as well. So if you only have the MAME LibRetro ROM set, they go into the appropriate ROMs folder. Only the MAME LibRetro display would show those games. MAME Advance would be empty and MAME for All would be empty. And say you didn't have the MAME for All ROM set. You could easily hide that screen by going in here, go to Show in Cycle, set that to a no, and Show in Menu and set that to a no. By just setting those two options, we didn't have to delete it or anything else. We just hid that display so we don't see it anymore. So if we ever do add ROMs for that emulator, we can just come back in here and set these back to a yes. So that's an easy way to hide any display that you don't have a ROM set for. So when it comes to the MAME emulators, what I've done is the pre-built ROM lists that are available. There's one for each of the different MAME emulator systems. But when it comes to the classics like Atari Classics, Capcom Classics, and those types of different displays that are set up, each one of them have a ROM list. And within that ROM list, say, let's go into displays. And we'll just go through and demonstrate it. Let's say we go to Atari Classics. If we go in here, we're currently using a ROM list called Atari Classics. Within that ROM list, and you can go look at them in the ROM list folder, but within that ROM list file, there's actually going to be 4 different rows for every single game in the Atari Classics ROM list. And that's because there's a row for a game for the MAME Advance version. There's a row for the MAME LibRetro version. There's a row for MAME for All. And there's a row for the Final Burn Alpha, if the Final Burn Alpha has that particular game in it. So because all of these have that global rule where it says file is available equals 1, even though the ROM list has all of those entries for every emulator possible for a particular game, when you copy over your particular ROM set, the only one that will show up in the display is the game that you actually have a ROM file for. So for instance, say you copied over MAME for All. In this case, in Atari Classics, if you would copy over your MAME for All, you would go into Atari Classics and you would only see one game for that particular one wheel for that particular game, because that's the only emulator you have is MAME for all. So because the other ROM files don't exist in the appropriate directories, they don't get shown in that display. So it's a little trickery in how it works, but what this allows us to do is to have a ROM list that's fully complete with every entry possible for that particular emulator or display. So here we are back at the main menu. So what I'm going to do is, right now this is a copy of the base image, and right now there aren't any ROMs located on this image. So what we're going to do is we're going to come over to the Atari Classics. Oh, and real quick, that's why there's 3 MAME displays set up for MAME, each of the 3 MAME emulators. So if you don't have one of these, or you don't use, say, MAME for all, you can go into the layout options and change those 2 options to no for show and cycle and show and menu, and that would hide that system selection wheel. So Final Burn Alpha is very similar to the MAME, same way. If you don't have Final Burn Alpha, just hide this display from being shown. But if you come over to Atari 2600, so we'll go into it, and as you can see, there aren't any listings. So I'm going to go ahead and change the colors on this too, just to give you guys another view of what's available. So let's go to green. Let's change this to green. So here's our green. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video. I'm going to copy over a few Atari 2600 ROMs into the appropriate directories, and then copy their media files as well. And then we're going to come back in here and we'll see that they will show up. Now, I won't have generated a new ROM list or anything. All I will have done is copied over the ROM files and the media files, and because of the way the ROM list is created with every game already in there, and the display has that global filter applied, instantly when you copy a ROM file over here with the matching media, it will automatically show in this display. So let's go back to the main menu, and I'm going to pause this video. Let me go copy those files, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I finished transferring over 5 different Atari 2600 ROM files and their matching media files into the proper folders. And as I mentioned, consult that included PDF file, because it has all of the information that you'll need to know where to copy ROM files, where to copy the media files, and plus a lot of other instructions on how to hide a display that you don't want and that sorts of thing. So let's go into the Atari 2600 system. And here are the 5 ROM files that I copied over. They automatically showed up. I didn't have to regenerate a ROM list. I didn't have to configure anything else. All I did was I copied 5 ROM files and their matching menu, wheel art, and preview videos to the proper folders, and that's all I had to do. Automatically they showed up, and that's because the design philosophy of Motion Blue, all of the ROM lists, as I mentioned, are fully complete from their HyperSpin XML database file. So the Atari 2600 ROM list file contains every single game for Atari 2600, all of the metadata for it, the year, the manufacturer, all of those things are already in the ROM list. So as soon as I copy over a ROM, they automatically show up in the display. And that's because the ROM list, and because every display that's created has that global filter set to say, only show me the games that I have ROM files for. That's how we can get away with having a full ROM list file ready to go, but only show the ROMs we copied over. So let's go back to the main menu. A couple of things I wanted to show you real quick is if we come over to the main attract mode. So let's say you didn't have the ZX Spectrum. All you need to do to get rid of it, to get it off of this system selection display menu, is to come in here, go down displays, and I'm just going to scroll to the bottom because it's quicker, is to change these 2 options, show and cycle to a no, and show and menu to a no. So because we changed those options, so you do have to refresh it, so we'll go into attract mode real quick, and then we'll go ahead and escape out. Automatically, ZX Spectrum is gone. So scrolling left and right, it was gone. And on the display menu, system selection screen, it's gone. So that's all you have to do to hide any of these displays that you don't have a ROM set for. Say you don't have the ROMs for SCUMV, MSX, Infocom, Amiga, Commodore. Instead of deleting that display, just hide it, because it's a lot quicker. It doesn't take up any extra space on the SD card because of it. And if you ever do get those ROM sets, you'll already be ready to go. So as a quick overview of what Motion Blue is and how it operates, I just wanted to throw a quick video together for you guys. But if you do download this and start your own RetroPie builds, I urge you guys to read that PDF guide to know where to put things. And as I mentioned, everything's already pre-configured and ready to go. It's just waiting on you to drop your ROMs, your BIOS, and your game media artwork into the proper folders, and you'll be ready to go, and you'll have your very own RetroPie build that you yourself built. Even though it's Motion Blue and the pre-default themes are the two different Motion Blues, there's many other layouts that are already included. So if you go into Irene, instead of using Motion Blue, there's all the normal ones, RoboSpin and everything else. All of them are all still there. They're still included. And plus you can easily download more and just copy them to the layouts folder and then select them here in the layout options, and to make it truly look the way you want it to look like. But anyway, this file is available for download. It's about a 3 gig 7-zip file. So it comes with the 8 gig image. It comes with the README PDF file. It comes with an additional PDF file about a little design philosophy about why I converted Motion Blue over to bridge the gap towards HyperSpin and its naming conventions. And it comes with a template Photoshop file. So these wheel art, system wheel arts that you see at the bottom, if there's one missing or you need to make one, then you will have the Photoshop template file to be able to do that. So, but anyway, there you go. I hope you guys enjoy it, and let me know if you guys use it and what you think.